Alright class, we're going to be learning about taking Cornell Notes today in the classroom and how we can be more successful by taking good notes. Why should we take Cornell Notes? Well, it's to help you remember, or to put it another way, to minimize your rate of forgetting. Dr. Walter Polk from Cornell University said, if people who don't take notes forget 60% of what they learned in 14 days. People who take some notes remember 60% of what they learned, and people who take organized notes and do something with them, which is what we're going to do, remember 90 to 100% of what they learned indefinitely. So, indefinitely. So it's going to help us remember what we've learned. Go. Alright, so when should you take Cornell Notes? Notes are a record of your learning, so we're going to take them when you listen to a brilliant lecture by Mrs. Dow, or when you watch a movie of Mrs. Dow doing a lecture, when you read your textbook, when you watch a film for our class. If you work on a group activity, you might take Cornell Notes, or when you need to recall information about what's happening in class, in a meeting, or an activity, which means all the time. All right, what are Cornell Notes? They are a systematic, meaning there is a system, a way to do it, a systematic way of organizing your notes. It was first developed by professors at Cornell universities for college students. And it's also a core strategy in the AVID program. So, how do we begin with Cornell Notes? What's the first step? Well, at grade middle school, we call it the STAR method. Okay? It has 4 steps. You're going to S, set up your paper, get ready for notes. You're going to T, take your notes. You're going to A, after class, add to your notes. And then you're going to R, review your notes. So let's look at those steps. S, setting up your paper. First, please put your name, date, and your class period on the top of your paper. You might have brilliant notes, but Mrs. Dow cannot give you credit for them if I don't know whose they are. You're going to make a skinny column on the left and a wide column on the right. Okay? Then you're going to have room for a summary at the bottom, and you're going to give your notes a title. So what will that look like? Let's do it together on a paper. Here's a piece of blank notebook paper ready for brilliant notes. We're going to put the title of our notes. For instance, the title of these notes might be How to Do Cornell Notes. You're going to put the date, you're going to put your name, and the period that you have Mrs. Dow. You're going to draw a vertical line down the left column of your paper. Some people want to use that original red line that's on the paper, but that's really not enough room. You need to come about an inch over, maybe half an inch over, and draw a vertical line that's parallel to the other red line. But draw a vertical line that leaves you room to write questions or maybe vocabulary words. Then you're going to draw a line at the bottom that leaves you just a little bit of space to write a summary of your notes. And then in the big section that you've left, the big rectangle, you're going to take notes, right? You could have bullet points, you could have drawings here, you can have vocabulary words. You might want to leave blank lines between your entries so that when you do the A in STAR, add to your notes, you'll have room to squeeze some things that you learned in between your notes. So when you set up your page, S is for setup, it's going to look like this. Then you're going to T, take notes. On the right-hand column, the big rectangle, you're going to record facts, explanations, definitions. You don't have to write every word. Abbreviate. Put it in your own words. Okay? You're not copying word from the book. That's what the book is for. These notes will be in your own words, and they'll be to help you remember the important points. You should use highlighting and underlining. You can draw circles and arrows around things if that's what makes you tune in to the important words. Don't worry too much about spelling, although vocabulary words, I do want you to know how to spell. And you might want to leave some white space, again, so that you can add details later. A, after you take your notes. All right, as soon as you can after you take your notes, you're going to correct any errors, right? You might fill in more information from a classmate. You looked at a textbook page on this same stuff. You saw some new information. You watched a movie, right? And you got some extra information. You might squeeze it in next to the vocabulary word that it applies to. Then you're going to look at the left-hand column, right? Once you've reviewed your notes, in the left-hand column, you're going to write the questions that these notes answer. For instance, if we're taking notes on Cornell Notes right now, the questions on the left might be, why are Cornell Notes important? How do you take Cornell Notes? How do you set up the page? Why do we need them? Those kind of questions might be in the left-hand column for these notes. All right. Some teachers say the A in STAR is for active listening, which you should be doing when you're taking your notes. You are actively listening to the speaker or the presentation. You're nodding your head. You are writing down the important words you hear. Maybe you're even asking questions if it's a live event. All right, so you have your title, your date, your name, your period. You have your vertical line going down the page. You have a line for the summary. You have taken notes in the large rectangular section, and you have written your questions down the small left-hand section, okay? The questions are a guide for what these notes are about. When you're studying, you can tune into what this page, without even reading the whole page, you know what questions this page answers. The summary at the bottom is going to help you summarize what you learned. So that's the R in STAR. So you're going to review your notes, right? You're going to use them as a study tool. The left-hand column has the questions it answers. The bottom of your notes is where your summary goes. Read over your notes. Read over the questions you answered. Write a summary. If I had to summarize what these notes tell me in 1 or 2 sentences, what do they tell me? Well, if you're taking notes on this presentation, it might be the importance of Cornell Notes and how to set them up, right? That might be your 1-sentence summary. It's in your own words. It's what you learned, right? When we put things in our own words, it runs it through our brain one more time, and it helps us to remember. Hashtag, this is when you're studying. All right, so think about creative ways, to use your Cornell Notes in my classroom. You might take notes on vocabulary words. Science is like learning another language. You're going to come across a lot of words you don't even know what they mean until you've written the vocabulary definitions. You might have critical thinking questions. You might learn new symbols. You might do a sketch of what we're learning, the layers of the earth, for instance, or tectonic plate boundaries. On the right side, right, are going to be the definitions for those vocabulary words. You might have a graphic organizer. You might have a diagram, and certainly you're going to have notes. All right. So on the left, it might not just be questions. Sometimes people put the vocabulary words on the left column and then the definition on the right, for instance.
What if you have a vocabulary?
So here's a good example of some good Cornell Notes. All right. These students have divided their page. They have written notes on the right-hand side. And they've also used sticky notes, right? They wanted to add to their notes. They added sticky notes to the left-hand column where they put their questions. All right, here's a student who bulleted their vocabulary words. Okay, the vocabulary words are down the left. Definitions are on the right. They've used highlighting. Excellent. They went back and added to their notes. They reviewed them. And then the summary at the bottom is a little bit informal, but they have summarized what they've learned. On the page on the right, they're learning about the laws of motion. So they write what they learned on the right. They even drew a diagram. On the left, they've noted, well, these are the 3 laws of motions. The first law, the second law, the third law. It tells you right away what these notes answer. And then at the bottom, they have written a summary about Newton's laws of motion and what they learned about it. All right, so let's review. What are the steps to taking Cornell Notes? What's S? Set up your page, right? What are we going to do? Do you remember? You're going to draw your margins. You're going to put your labels at the top of the page. Title, your name, your period, the date. Then you're going to T, take notes. What are we doing during that? We're using our best note-taking strategies, and we're using active listening. We're paying attention. We're listening for key words. We're writing down the main ideas. What comes after T? A. After our notes, we're going to analyze. We're going to ask questions. We're going to add details. We're going to add pictures. A is for after the notes you add. And then you're going to R, review, revise, reflect. You're going to write your summary at the bottom. You're going to look over them. You might highlight your notes. You might add information you learned. And certainly by now you've written your questions and you add your reflection. So now you've not only listened to the information, you've taken notes on the information. You figured out what you were supposed to learn from the information, the questions on the left. And you've also summarized the information in your own words at the bottom. So you've run through this information in 3 different ways, and that's why at Cornell University they say this helps you remember 90% of what you've learned. All right? So here's some excellent Cornell notes. The title is Electromagnetics. They put the date. What's missing? No name, no period. They have divided their page. They have S set up their notes. They have T, taken notes. Okay? They have A. After their notes, they've gone back and highlighted, right? They've highlighted what's important. They have added their questions on the left. What do these notes answer? Well, it's different kind of waves. This is obviously a science class. And then at the bottom, when they are studying, they are reviewing, they have written a summary of their notes so that they've run through the information one more time and they know what it means to them. So that's how to take Cornell notes. Yours might not look exactly like your friends, but it's a systematic, remember, a system, a way to do it that will help you remember, hopefully, 90% of what you've learned, and you'll be able to retain it longer and do better in my class. So that's Cornell Notes, and I hope that was helpful.